welcome to Ask Me About K-Pop, the essential guide for recent converts and seasoned fans alike. My name is Shannon.
And I'm Angelica.
And welcome to the show. It is time to finally, something we said would do for a long time. We're going to revisit a very old episode of the podcast. Because we've been doing this for 4+ years now.
And it's true.
Time has passed.
It's so true.
K-pop history has evolved.
Yeah, and we're now at a place, we're in a very different place now from where we were at the beginning of the show to be able to like look back and reevaluate certain pieces of K-pop history.
Yes. So what we are talking about today, as suggested by someone in our episode suggestion channel.
But like many moons ago, I think.
A while ago. Just finally getting around to it. We are going to revisit our third generation episode. This was episode 20. It was called The Next Generation / Listener Q&A because we only talked for about 20 minutes about the third / fourth generation because I listened to the episode again this weekend. I even said like, it feels too close, but maybe in 5 years we'll be able to relook at this. And it's been about 4.5. So perfect time to revisit.
So
and it definitely does feel much clearer to me. It's still a generation delineation and it's still wishy-washy and it's still entirely opinion-based. But it feels clearer now than it did back then.
I agree. And I think that like looking at the time period of groups that you pulled, like you can see a very clear difference between the style of those groups and like the groups that are coming out now. And like we've talked about in our other generation episodes, like the generations themselves are so debatable, like when the cutoffs are. And I think like first and second are pretty well like approved. Everyone has a consensus of when those are, but I think especially the end of the third gen and the start of the fourth gen can be a little bit blurry. So we're just going to have sort of an open discussion about a particular time period and look for trends, and see if we can find, anything of note.
Yeah. And I also think something that makes discussing the generations a little more complicated as the years go on is that like first gen was very well defined just because like it was very well defined, but also the average age or like average longevity of a group in the first gen was 3 years. Like
True.
Nobody was sticking around for a very long time. But now we're at a point where second gen groups are still putting out albums here in the fourth gen. And like the, groups keep going across generations in a way that they didn't originally.
Totally.
So then it makes it kind of weird to talk about because it's kind of like I was thinking when putting this together that like BTS is firmly a third generation group. Yes, that is like, clear. But so many of their biggest, most insane accomplishments have happened during like when fourth gen groups are debuting. So like it's a third gen accomplishment, but it like happened in a fourth gen time period.
Yeah, totally.
So it just makes it all kind of like, I don't know. That's why it's kind of silly to talk about anyway, because it's just like, I don't know.
Yes, but that's a really good point about the longevity of the groups, because what that means is that like a lot, like in the third gen, the period we're going to talk about now, like a lot of the records or like notable accomplishments that are happening for K-pop during the third generation, a lot of them are being accomplished by groups that debuted in the second gen. And so then again, just like you were saying, like in the fourth generation, like our third gen groups that we're going to talk about, they debuted in this third period, but they're not going to really start making huge names for themselves until like the fourth gen is already underway. So that's why I think it gets a little bit muddy.
Yeah. But I think that we're mostly like when talking about generations, we're talking about like the period of time that you debuted in. Like,
Agreed.
And that's what's important. But it's interesting because I think same, like there's the cuspers is like what's interesting to me, because in this section, so we decided based on our previous episodes 18 and 19, the generations we looked at then. Today we're looking at like 2010-ish to about the end of 2016, because it is my personal feeling and opinion that in the same way that BoA is the last first generation idol who started the second generation, Blackpink is the last third generation idol group to me, because I think they just changed things like so much for like what the style and sound of a girl group is, and every girl group that debuted after them like it just started a new thing.
Yeah,
so to me that is a moment.
I totally agree. I think that their influence, not only in like the music and choreo and like style of the girl group, but also in the way that they put out and promote music, it isn't the same as previous generations, because like they usually, until they put out that one album, like they had only ever put out singles, and like that's really not how most K-pop groups work. But I think it is more common now for groups to, especially like smaller groups that are just starting to like only put out a couple of songs. They might not necessarily release a whole EP. I don't know. There's just a lot about the way that Blackpink, I think, is marketed and promoted that sets them apart from the things that came before, and because they were so successful, made such a huge influence on the groups that came after, that I think they're a reasonable cusp.
Yeah, so that's like that's to me where this generation more or less ends. NCT kind of debuted around the same time, and they feel like a good last third gen, first, fourth gen
I also
kind of
agree.
group.
Yeah. The last few groups on here are Pentagon, NCT, and Blackpink. And Blackpink, like I just said, but also NCT. Like NCT has really changed the game in a lot of ways, both because of how many freaking people there are, and like the whole concept of the different groups, and like the styling and the sound of NCT is like without a doubt super influential to the fourth gen. So yeah, like NCT and Blackpink definitely feel like they're sort of separating from the pack. And then even Pentagon is interesting because they're so self-produced, that like that makes them pretty different. So like the latter half of these third gens, but like something like Monsta X and 17, like those do feel very, I don't know, actually, now that I say that out loud, Monsta X and 17, yeah, they are cuspers. Little cuspers.
Yeah.
Like a little millennial Gen Z cusp.
Yes. Same with the beginning of this generation. Like, similarly, I tried to format my notes and research for this episode the way that I did the first two. I'm way better at research now than I was back then. So, like, that's something. But I tried to organize it a similar way and just kind of pull a list of like 25 of like, you know, popular notable
names,
groups of the time to like look at them. And when I lay them all out like in debut order, the 2010, early 2011 groups of Infinite, ZEA, Teen Top, Miss A, Sistar, and A-Pink, to me, even though we said time period wise, like that's a third gen 2010, the style and the feeling and everything about those groups feels second gen to me.
Totally.
Like it hadn't quite shifted yet into like something else. So it's like those are technical, but like that cusp of like they still feel kind of second gen, but it's the 2010s now. So like I don't know, things are different.
Yeah. But because they're right on that cusp, they like still hold on to so many of the like styles and patterns and concepts of the previous group. So I totally agree that those groups feel a bit more second gen, especially thinking about like A-Pink and Sistar and Miss A, One Infinite. I mean, everything. That's all of the groups that you just said. But thinking about how like the TV shows that they went on and stuff, like I think about A-Pink and I think about like them interacting with Shiny, and like I think about Sistar and I think about like them being on shows and interacting with like the 2PMs, and like I don't know, I just like
and Miss A to me felt like
groups.
a 2PM
counterpart,
and they were always together, so I think of them as being from the same time.
Yeah, so I like associate them with a lot of second gen groups in a way that the other groups that come out a little bit later in what we're calling the third gen, I don't necessarily, I might associate them more with each other. And so they feel more like solidly third gen. Do we want to just run down this list? Do you want to just tell us the samplings of groups that you
Sure.
pulled to give us an idea of
Here's
who
a
we're talking about?
sampling. So after those cuspers, after that I just mentioned, then we get into, we've got B1A4, Block B and Crayon Pop. Then we got our EXO, EXID, BAP, B2B, VIX, AOA, Newest, BTS, Eric Nam. I'll pause for a moment just to say I thought this was really interesting. BTS and Eric Nam both debuted in 2013. And that was like a really bare year for debuts. Like, I don't know what was going on, but they're just like, groups were not being put out at the frequency that they usually are.
Interesting.
And of all of the groups that debuted that year, only BTS and Eric Nam like have survived to this point.
Wow.
Like,
Interesting.
nobody else from that year hit at all, which I just like thought was kind of wild to see.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Then 2014, we've got GOT7, Mamamoo, Red Velvet, G-Friend, Monsta X17, Twice, Astro, Pentagon, NCT, and then I chose to cap it at Blackpink. I'm sure you could argue there's more cusp going forward, but like that's where I chose to cap it. Because another thing I was thinking is when you look at a lot of the groups that debuted in 2016, a ton of the girl groups from 2016 were the groups that came from IOI members getting to be put in groups. And to me, that also feels like such a fourth gen thing to be like, here's the TV show group. And then they split up and they made like 10 other groups and solo artists. And that's
Totally.
a new like gen of idols.
I
Here they
agree. Yeah. I agree. Once we start getting all of the groups and soloists from all the different produced seasons, I feel like that's a very fourth gen thing, because even though, you know, like a group like Monsta X or Pentagon, like those are sort of toward the latter half of what we just named in the timeline, and those were both like competition groups, but it's so different from something like Produce, where you get like the temporary, the X one, and then you have like all of these boys that scatter to the winds, and they're in the way and the two and the whatever, like all of these other gravities and
Right.
etc. All these groups that are just like popping out of the woodworks.
Yeah. And that is one thing that we did discuss in our original episode 20 when we weren't sure what to make of this generation. One thing we knew for sure is groups being formed on elimination style reality shows was absolutely a thing that
Yeah.
like happened in this generation very often.
In fourth gen or in third?
In third gen, because like Fix and Monsta X and Twice and like all, and Winner and Icon and we Pentagon, we named them all in episode 20, but like all of these groups were formed on
That's
like
true.
TV shows, which was like a new thing. Like 2 p.m. and
Yes.
2 a.m. had done a TV show back in second gen, but they were kind of the only ones. It like wasn't common until this generation.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then I wonder if maybe the fact that so many groups were formed and debuted in the third gen from those shows, I wonder if that helped influence like the creation and popularity of something like Produce, where it's like, well, these shows are really popular and they created groups, like let's just widen it, as opposed to like, instead of being like by one company, like let's just grab all the companies.
Let's take all the trainees.
Yeah,
take 'em
exactly.
all.
And make these weird ass temporary groups. Why not?
Yeah.
But that's
did.
more for our fourth. We'll save those Produce discussions
We'll
for our
save
fourth
those.
gen episode.
Then
Eventually.
we'll have to wait 5 more years.
It will have to
do,
wait
yeah.
another 5 years. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, getting into some kind of trends and tropes of this generation, let's start by talking about third gen music videos.
All right, great.
And if there's anything that sets them apart from first and second gen music videos. And I definitely think there is like a vibe of this generation's music video, and it just feels like like an extension of the standard K-pop box video set by the second generation.
Mm-hmm.
But like now it's a little more grittier. Like one of the things that I noticed is that from like 2010 to like 2015, all of the music videos had this like weirdly darkened contrast. Like everything was just kind of like muted and like green, like a late Harry Potter movie. Like even a music video where people were wearing colorful outfits or whatever, it like still had like a fucking gray little twinge on it. And I'm not sure why that was, but you can definitely see it when you like watch a bunch of them in a row. And another thing I noticed when watching a bunch of them in a row, and I know this is just like music video stuff, but it like felt really apparent, is that the box set that they were dancing in would be like vaguely foggy, and they would do that like camera flash strobe effect like constantly to just keep the whole thing kind of, I don't know, there's this K-poppy, this frantic-y K-poppy thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of very high energy. And I feel like there was maybe even, you could argue, like a sort of franticness to a lot of the initial debut songs. I don't know. I feel like I'm just trying to think back to like the EXO debuts and like the newest debuts and the like GOT7 debut. And I don't know, maybe I'm also just thinking of that like idea that happens so constantly in this gen, where like the boy groups are supposed to be like tough in some way, and then they like quickly lose that like fake hip hop concept like a few minutes in or whatever, or a few comebacks in, they like lose that pretty quickly. But I don't know, there's sort of like a when I look at the names of these boy groups, the boy groups in particular that debuted in this gen, I feel like they are a little like harder or like tougher like sounds as well when they come out. So like maybe that correlates with the sort of muted color palette, is that they're almost like coming out a little bit harder, so it's not like bubblegum and sweet and like Nuna, like we're like here to be like, I don't know, dystopia and like the world isn't great.
Yeah. Which does like call back a little bit to like a first gen grit. That's kind of interesting, because it's like, second gen was like hella polished, super bright. The popular girl groups were happy, fun, good times in our short little skirts, and like skinny, pretty, shiny boys were popular. And then the third gen, weirdly enough, like this is a bit of concept talk, but it's fine. We'll get all over the place like we did in the original episodes. But like B1A4, Block B, BAP, BTS, Monsta X all debuted with the exact same concept. That was like, we have drop crotch pants and little hats, and we're gonna go like this. And it's just so funny that they like I just remember this time period of being like, every single boy group looks exactly the same.
Yeah. Even EXO, when they had, like, even though they did their, like, over-the-top theatrics with, like, Mama and History, they still wore, like, you know, the, like, hip-hop terry cloth, like, sweatsuits or whatever, with, like, 1,000 bandanas everywhere as they're, like, making their Tree of Life for Wolf or whatever. So it's, like, even if the music wasn't the same concept visually, it was the same.
Yes. I feel like all the boy groups at this time like started out looking exactly the same.
Totally.
And then they all figured out kind of what their thing was as it went on. But
and that's really interesting too. Like, well, it's fun like to be able to look at how many of the groups that debuted in this gen are still around, because we can see the fun ways that they have evolved, like EXO, BTS, like GOT7, Monsta X 17, like they've all gone through like very big transformations. I think even the girl groups too, like Mamamoo, Red Velvet, and G-Friend. Oh, well, I guess G-Friend's not around anymore, sorry. But like these groups also like went through a lot of different changes. Twice is a great example. Blackpink, I think, is maybe the one group on here that is probably the most consistent. I feel like they are looking at this list of groups that are still around, like they are the ones that I can say without a doubt, like from beginning to end, they still make
Have
the
stuck
same
with
kind
their
of
thing.
music. Yeah. They've never changed their vibe. That's funny. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
It was such a strong vibe. It made such an
It is such
impact.
a
Like,
strong vibe, and it's so
if it
successful.
ain't
Like,
broke,
why
don't
change it?
fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the music videos, yeah, I feel like in this era, like the box video still reigned supreme. Mm-hmm. We hadn't quite gotten into our like excessive CGI. And like the first gen had excessive CGI, but it was like bad because
Yeah.
CGI was new and cool. And now CGI is something that you can do really cheap and really easy. So it's like a way to like I feel like music videos right now have so much like fucking CGI in them. So that was not a
Totally.
thing really in third gen yet.
Yeah. We're still getting more of the box videos, but not a ton of music videos that are like set on location and stuff. We're getting
That started to definitely happen towards the end of the gen. Like I feel like 2015, 2016 was when it started to get cool to go film videos like
different
in Coachella
places.
Valley.
Yeah.
And like everyone doing their like desert or that rock painting art exhibit, shooting their music videos there and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so like dances of the third gen, how do we feel about like choreo in third gen? Is there anything about it that sets it apart?
Well, I mean, I think you can argue this for almost every generation, but I do think there's something to be said about like every generation ups the complexity of the choreo.
Yeah.
I also think in this gen you're getting some pretty big groups that have a lot of members in them. You're getting a lot of like big formations and stuff like that. Man, I'm trying to think of like dances that like went viral. I don't know. I guess the only one I'm really
I have
thinking of-
I have a small list of some ones that like I remember being viral or won dance performance awards at Melons or Mamas. And like we have the crayon pop bar dance. Like that was obviously its own whole thing because crayon pop was like super unique and it was a fun little jumpy dance. Everyone loves a jumpy dance. Also, Block B's song Her
Oh yeah.
was like crazy popular and it had a little like wiggly knee dance that was very fun to do. The Beast song Fiction. Beast is a second gen group, but they did this song Fiction where they had their hands in their pockets and they did this fancy footwork and that was like a huge deal.
Ooh, love a hands in pockets move.
The Girls' Day song Something, very sexy, little bouncy, lots of like boys covered in drag, like everyone learned it, like that was a moment. Red Velvet's Ice Cream Cake was one of those dances that it seemed like all of the idols were like learning to do on shows or whatever. Same with BTS's I Need You. Everybody knew the choreo to that one. And then G-Friend's song Rough was also insanely popular and lots of people learned the dance to that one because it's
Totally.
wild. G-Friend dances were wild.
Yeah.
We can take a second to talk about that because like G-Friend made Princess Disco anime credit music almost exclusively until towards the end. But they would do this very complicated, sharp elbow, kicky, like choreo to these precious disco songs. And it was so fascinating and so unique because it never seemed like it should go.
Yes,
But
I
it
agree.
did somehow.
It did go somehow. It was almost like, I don't know, like some little, like a music box ballerina or something, like to the anime credit music. Because, yeah, like the Rough in particular, I'm thinking of the like super dramatic strings, so like do 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 ta or whatever. And you like, there's the
Yeah.
footwork was so intricate and the arms were so sharp, but then you had so many like super soft, spinny, like figure skating turns and like
Yes, little tiny
layouts and
turns.
like, yes. And the like combination of styles in their choreo was super unique. I don't think any of the other like third gen girls were really making that kind of music or doing that style of choreo. And they kind of made like, they really stuck to that concept so precisely for so long. That was interesting. But yeah, they were very different. Very different. I also feel like, I don't know if this is a dance that people necessarily all learned, although I know the like main part of it is you know, like easy to know, but growl, EXO growl is especially the music video is like so choreo focused, and the music video is like a one take, and the dance practice is filmed that way as well, and that music video, well, I mean, even like when we talked to Blitzers, like 4 of them mentioned EXO growl as being something that made them want to be a dancer or something. And I think that that's true of a lot of people who became idols in this 4th, possibly like current 5th gen, if you wanted to argue that, I don't know, for another episode for another time. But yeah, I think that that one was super influential in getting people to want to become idols later on.
Yeah. I meant
huge.
to like, I wasn't sure what metric to go by to judge it for, but I meant to like look like what were some of the absolute biggest songs of this generation, and I can say without even checking that Growl would be extremely high, if not the most important song of this generation, because it was unbelievably popular.
Yeah. So hugely popular. I know, like between Growl and Gangnam Style. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like those are probably some of the biggest ones from this time period.
Absolutely.
As far as reach and stuff.
I just always think of that SM interview where they're like, Growl built this building.
Yes, Key said that. And I'm sure that it's true. I'm sure that one song absolutely bought $1 million building. Yeah, I believe it.
I mean, EXO was huge. Like this 3rd gen, so many of the like, what are they called? Like the records, or the like milestones that were made were from EXO in this gen. They were quite huge.
Yeah, this was their moment.
This was their time. Now they're all old men.
Yeah.
Whose time has
fathers.
Passed. Oh my God, they are fathers of 2. Oh, wow. All right, what else? What else are some defining features of this generation?
So getting into how like fan culture might have changed or what it was based around in this time period. I would say that this is the beginning of like streaming culture. We didn't quite have like Spotify yet, so that part wasn't really part of it, but YouTube views were absolutely part of this generation, and like people were obsessed with YouTube views. I know they still are, but that was like a new part of K-pop fandom, was that like during this generation is when people were like, okay, YouTube is a thing. And they started actually officially uploading music videos.
Totally.
Because when at the beginning of this generation, a lot of the K-pop music videos were like fan re-uploads. And like no one was officially putting music videos up. But then they started to. So then you get into your view count bullshit.
Yes, and it's interesting too the way that kind of took off, because and I know we have this as sort of like a fun fact later on, but I already mentioned it earlier, like we all know Gangnam Style was absolutely enormous by Psy. It came out in 2012, and that was one of the like first YouTube videos to reach like 1 billion views or something, and it was so popular and was viewed so many times that it actually forced YouTube to change the way that it counted views. views, because it like broke 2 billion views and they had to change the like integer counter that they used.
Make the counter higher.
Yeah, they literally had to like recode it or whatever because it like wasn't working anymore. And that was in 2012, which is like kind of at the beginning of this generation. So definitely makes a big difference like once people are starting to like promote their music, like the YouTube views are suddenly important, where I feel like in the second gen they were not important at all and now they are for the first time. But I also read that the censorship rules changed in 2012. So music videos for the first time had to go through the censorship review system in order to be on like distributed online. So that was really interesting. Like if you did not put your music video through the CRS, the censorship review system, then it was banned from being distributed online. So you like had to submit it in order to even like put it on YouTube. So I don't know necessarily how that like affected what kind of music videos were made, or like what kind of effect that would have made on like the style of music videos. That would have to be more of like a bit of a deep dive, which would be interesting to come back to later, the effects of the censorship. But I also thought it was interesting because now like this gen is going to be under review in a way that the previous generations were not. And that includes music shows as well, because every single broadcasting station has their own censorship review committee. They all use the same system, but it's not all reviewed by the same people. And so that's why it seems like KBS or SBS or like music, whatever, they have slightly different censorship rules because they have different people doing the censorship, or like they have different people like reviewing the materials and whatever. But so even like being able to play them and then even being able to like perform the songs, for example, like you had to submit the final version of the song. You had to submit a final version of the lyrics with any English lyrics translated into Korean. And then like if they didn't approve or whatever, you had to change the lyrics and then you could resubmit them. So it was like a much longer process to even like get shit on the air, which is interesting because I wonder if that also had an effect on like the companies and like how much money you're spending. And like, I don't know, it just seems like possibly in this generation it became more complicated to distribute your music. Like you're gonna have to go through more hoops and steps because it is so much more popular now, that it's like, oh, K-pop is so big now that we have to start making sure that these music videos are appropriate, whereas before it like wasn't something that necessarily had to be under review. So it's interesting,
right? Because we've found that a lot of first gen music videos are excessively violent, or like people are smoking cigarettes in them, like things that you can't even do on drama.
Or like second gen boy group, those second gen boy groups where like the members of the group would literally die in the music video and they like actually get bloodily stabbed. Like we don't get any of that shit in the third gen. Like EXO is not being stabbed. No one is gonna watch BTS bleed out in an alley. Like,
no one wants it.
No one wants that anymore. And now it's not allowed. More importantly, it's not allowed.
Interesting. Also, for fan culture, Instagram was launched in 2010, but by like 2012, it was on Android and iPhone and everyone had it. So starting in like 2012, then idols started getting Instagrams. Whereas, which is very interesting in that whole globalization and Hallyu of K-pop, is that in previous generations, things like teaser images or selfies from idols or whatever would only be uploaded on like smtown.com or the fan cafes or whatever. And now it's like Instagram. Everyone can have Instagram and can follow you and see pictures. And so like I think that definitely changes fan interaction in a way.
Totally, because that I feel like has sort of like a two-pronged effect in that, one, along with the YouTube like online distribution of music videos, it's making it so much more accessible for international fans, but two, it's also making the idols themselves more accessible to like speak directly to their fans, because like, you know, eventually they'll be able to do like Instagram lives or like whatever. They could like respond back to a comment, or like you can directly message them or whatever. And so yeah, it's definitely going to like make things easier for people outside of Korea to find and keep up with and like learn more about it. But then it also changes the way that the idols are able to interact with their fans and vice versa. So definitely getting a lot of, I think, a lot of the sort of pillars that make up current fan culture are definitely being constructed here in this third gen.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought was like an interesting, this is a TV show, but I feel like it's important to the fan culture, in that the TV program Weekly Idol began airing in 2011. And
Nice.
I think that Weekly Idol is no longer as relevant as it used to be. Like, I know it's still on for whatever reason, but like, I think in the third gen, Weekly Idol was a really important show. And for a lot of groups, it was kind of the only promotion that you could do other than going on music shows, because YouTube shows weren't as popular, and we didn't have our like journalism, like our Cosmopolitan 17 magazines doing like, you know, Monsta X plays 20 questions. Like that kind of content did not exist. You got to go on Weekly Idol.
Exactly.
And that was kind of it. So like that show was really important for like a lot of reasons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was like the only place where idols got to go and like play silly games and be kind of like a little bit more relaxed, with the focus still being some kind of interview. Because, you know, like if they're going to go on Running Man, like it's not the same kind of vibe. Like they have an obstacle, they have a like task to complete or something.
And being on Running Man means you're one of like 15 people, including the regular cast that most people are there to watch.
Totally. And Weekly Idol, it's like you're only...
The Today Show is about you, unless it was one of those rookie episodes where they had like 3 groups. But those episodes were really important to all of those rookie groups. And like, it was a popular show, and it was a good way to get your face out there. And it was like the source of so much fan content. Like, I feel like if you watch, you know, like my favorite funny EXID moments or whatever, like from a third gen group, I feel like most of the clips are from Weekly Idol. Like that was the show where you got your content.
Yeah. Because it's where they got to be like goofy, and it was just them.
Another thing that we've done a whole episode about and talked about a bunch of times, but it is a fan community thing, which is that K-Con, the first K-Con was in 2012.
Yes.
So that's a physical gathering of K-pop fans, mostly in the United States, but all over the world.
Yes, they are. They now have K-Cons all over the place, but it did start in the U.S. and California. More information on that in a whole episode dedicated.
There's a whole episode about it. Also, we talked about this in episode 20, and I do think that it is definitely like used in a much stronger way in this current generation, but V Live was launched at like the end of the third gen. So it was the beginning of this new like live content app. And now V Live is so important and is a whole different beast than it was back then. But I think it's important to note that's when it came about.
Yeah, well, and coming out in 2015, I think that sets up all of these groups that came out in the third gen to be the ones who can really like explore V Live on the ground floor, because, you know, like the fourth gen groups that are just debuting after 2015 might not be the ones to hop on the V Live right away, because you're going to want to guarantee that people are watching. So so you know what I mean? Like a third gen, more established group are going to be the ones that are probably going to start experimenting with the V Lives.
Yeah. One of the first, just a fun fact, I'm sure we've said this before, but one of the like first V Lives ever was those shiny V Lives where like Key and Mino are in the closet and Onu and Jonghyun are in the like dance practice room.
Yes.
But that was like it started out as a very different platform than it has become today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And another thing that I thought was interesting to note, because in this section for all of the other generation episodes we've talked about, like in the first gen, they wore their picture capes and they had their balloons. And in the second gen, like Big Bang invented light sticks. But the third gen, like heightening of that is when EXO launched their Bluetooth enabled light sticks, which is now the standard, I feel like, is that most companies do Bluetooth on their light sticks so that you can do the crazy synchronized color show at the concert.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, and
it's
you
the
sync them
neatest
up to
thing
the
in the
costume
world
lights.
to see.
I mean, the stage lights. Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I know we were surprised at the Twice concert that they were. I don't know if the light sticks are not Bluetooth synced, but they did not sync up during the concert. And I thought that was interesting because I was like, oh, I feel like it's been a while since I've seen a concert where they didn't light them. Yeah, like even at the Super M concert where everybody had the different group light sticks, like those still
That was
synced.
my favorite. That was my absolute favorite, was at the Super M show that there were 5 different light sticks in play and they all synced anyway.
Yeah.
So fun.
That was really cool. And even at KCON, like the last couple times we went to KCON, they gave everybody a wrist bracelet. And that synced up. Those were all synced up. So yeah, that's definitely a thing.
So speaking of concerts, any notable concerts or anything that's different about concerts in the third gen as opposed to the others?
I don't know about things that are necessarily different, but I feel like we're getting more concerts, we're getting bigger concerts, and we're getting bigger tours because in terms of the Hallyu wave, like now that we're in the third gen, we have a pretty solid international fan base even outside of Asia. And so like we're starting to get more regular US tours, not necessarily like yes, of the individual groups, but also of like, a music bank festival that's in a different country, or like the K-Cons where they're bringing in big names, or like the international music festivals are bringing in the K-pop artists as well. But yeah, there are definitely some notable concerts. Perhaps our favorite being the one in October 2011. We had SM Town at Madison Square Garden, and I know we've definitely talked about this concert before.
But that, like you were just saying, is interesting. That like I think the interesting thing about the third gen is that these groups are definitely like coming to more places than they used to, but like you said, you need like multiple groups to justify the venues. Like 2011, you need every single artist at SM in order to sell out Madison Square Garden. I think NCT did Madison Square Garden by themselves a couple months ago. Like
totally.
Now we're at a point where the groups don't even need to do compilation shows and they can be in these huge venues. But at this time it was like we can get a huge venue if we make it a festival.
Yes.
And bring everyone.
Yeah, that was interesting. I tried to look up some sort of like general concert info for each year just to get an idea of like concerts outside of Asia, outside of Korea, like how often were they each year. And like in 2011 there were only 3 outside of Asia. There was a Korean music festival in LA, there were 2 SM Town performances, and there was 1 JYJ tour, and that was the only artist that toured outside of Asia in 2011.
Interesting.
And then in 2012, just the very next year, we had 19 artists or events that had shows outside of Asia. 6 of them were tours, and all the rest of them were festivals. But then even in the next year, so then the next year, they're just going to start growing. Like 2013, we had 25 shows, 11 of them are tours. 2014, we had 27 shows, and 13 are tours. So it's just like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. And now, like you said, like a group like NCT, which is a bit of a cusper, like they can sell out Madison Square Garden all on their own. Interesting. But some other notable concerts, I did see that like in November and December of 2012, Big Bang became the first Korean artist to perform at 3 of the Japanese domes in one tour during their Big Bang Alive Galaxy tour. We've talked a lot about the dome concerts. They're a very big deal and a very big marker of success when touring Japan. And in 2014, I wrote this down because I couldn't believe that it happened. But apparently...
I'm still sad. I remember this so well. Sorry, go on.
Los Angeles had a free concert that included Shiny, 2PM, Infinite, Sistar, Girls' Day, Sea and Blue, and Dynamic Duo. It was for the anniversary of something, and it was like a collaboration between different like Korean community groups in California or in Los Angeles, but the concert was freaking free. It was free, y'all.
Yeah, I remember this. I remember this so well because similarly to my wedding getting in the way of a Shiny concert, this concert was very close to my friend Vanessa's wedding. And I was still living in Texas at the time. I didn't even live in LA. But I was trying to figure out how I could possibly like get to LA for 24 hours and like come back for a wedding. And I was like way too poor to try to do that at the time. And I was like really sad about it. But I also remember feeling like kind of okay with it and like that it was okay because Mino was still the M Countdown host at the time. So he didn't even come.
Yeah.
They just brought 4 shinies because he was too busy emceeing to even show up. And they went to Six Flags without him.
Yep. Yes.
I
remember us rationalizing to ourselves that it was okay that we missed it because Mino wasn't there.
Yes. I also saw that BTS did like a 3-city little tour in 2015 that was called the Highlight Tour, and that the whole thing was like an absolute disaster.
Oh no.
And that the promoters like oversold the shows by like hundreds of tickets.
Oh, shit.
So people were just like waiting outside in the street and they were like, "Oh, sorry, you can't come in. It's full." So then they promised all the people in the line that they would get to take like a high touch photo. And so then they like crammed them all in a room and had BTS like sit on the floor, and the staff was screaming at everybody, and like I don't know, it just sounded like it was a
mess.
true nightmare.
Wow. Oh man, yeah, that sounds terrible.
But now they get to sell out like full stadiums and I'm sure nobody treats them like that anymore. And it's all fine.
Oh yeah, never. The only other thing I wrote down for our concerts in this gen, and just kind of shows like the growth that happens, because like you mentioned, in 2012 is when KCON starts, and as we mentioned in our episode about KCON, they started as just a one-day event like out in Anaheim, which is outside of LA, like near Disneyland, and then in 2015 the event moved to the Staples Center in downtown LA and became a 3-day event. So just 3 years later, they were big enough to be able to sell out the Staples Center and extend their event to be 3 days.
Pretty cool stuff.
Pretty cool.
Pretty
All right,
cool.
let's talk about some things that are not cool.
Yeah.
Tell us about some controversies that happened during this gen.
Yes, we always have to talk about this gen's controversy, the controversies of the generation. And I will say, like, a lot of them didn't make it to this list because, I don't know, in that way that time goes on, a lot of really big controversies that happened during this time were happening to first gen idols.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, you know what I mean? Like now those first gen idols are 35 and have gambling problems or whatever. And so like
Totally.
that's a lot of the controversies. So I tried to find things that were slightly more like relevant.
Second, third gen members.
Yeah. So like the Tiara bullying scandal was in 2012. We went all into that in the Tiara episode. 2013 was when all Kpop published Ailey's nudes. We talked about that in the journalism episode.
I believe so.
And then I'm just going to run through these in like a quick list because maybe someday we can do an episode and dive into all of these things a little deeper. But a lot of fans consider 2014 to be, quote, the worst year in K-pop. And here is just a small, like there are more things that could go on this list, but here is a small list of things that happened in 2014. We had our EXO lawsuit, most popular boy group. Once again, like TVXQ, everyone's leaving. The girl group Ladies Code got in a car crash and 2 of the members died. Mm-hmm. There was a tragedy at a Songnam festival, music festival, where 16 fans died when a floor collapsed during a 4-minute concert. Park Bom had her drug scandal and like more or less got removed from 21. Sully had her dating scandal and more or less got removed from FX. Jessica was kicked out of SNSD. Glam, Big Hit's only girl group, had their huge blackmail scandal where they blackmailed an actor.
And we talked about that when we got them in the random game, but I don't remember what episode that was. But we've definitely talked about Glam before.
I think it was in shortest lived group.
Oh, yes.
The whole Glam scandal, maybe.
Totally. Because Big Hit, like, never had a girl group again until this year.
Let's see. Lee Tuck from Super Junior's dad did a murder-suicide that year.
Oh, fuck. I don't think I knew that. That's messed up.
It's really messed up. Double S 501, Kim Hyun-jun, that was the beginning of his whole domestic violence case with his baby mama. BAP sued their company for slave contract stuff. Members Ji-young and Nicole left the girl group Kara, and then the company had a reality show to pick new members. Yeah. And that's just a small list of things that happened in like 1 year of K-pop. So people were like very sad and overwhelmed and worried like all the time because every day it was like something crazy seemed to happen.
Yeah, and like it's like one right after the other. So many different idols are being affected by so many different scandals. Like it's not the same thing happening over and over. You know what I mean? Like there's a wide
like with
spectrum.
The recent bullying scandal.
Totally,
like, all these people are in trouble for the same thing.
Yes, but no, this is like a lawsuit, a car crash, drugs, dating, blackmail, like so much different stuff. And so that would like, I get why people would be on edge of like, you never know what's going to happen next or who it's going to be at or who it's going to affect. Like, oof.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So that was supposedly the worst year ever in K-pop, 2014. And we've discussed this before, but in 2015, one of the big news was that U-Kiss member Eli had a secret family and had been married for like years and years to a woman who was 9 years older than him, and they had a kid and stuff. They are divorced now, by the way.
Bummer.
But like that was our like, you know, our secret K-pop baby daddy of the moment.
I gotta go home to my wife and 4 kids.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I also saw that in 2015, Oh My Girl was detained in Los Angeles by U.S. Customs on suspicion of being sex workers. The group was traveling to the U.S. in order to shoot an album cover, but they were detained at the airport for 15 hours after the authorities got suspicious of their costumes and props. And there was like an official statement from their company that they put out, like saying that they believe that that's why they were detained, like because they thought they were sex workers, but also that there may have been a problem with some of the girls' visas, and like that's part of the reason why it took so long. But I couldn't find whether, because it said that they had been going to LA to like shoot this album cover, and then they had also been booked at some like to perform somewhere. And but then the article ended by saying that there was no word on whether or not they would complete their album shoot. So I don't know if they ever got to actually continue on and do the events that they had planned in LA, or if they had to turn around and go back. I don't really know the details of how that was resolved, but I just thought that was fascinating, especially because I think a group of, you know, like 6 or 7 young Korean girls or Korean boys nowadays with suitcases full of costumes and props, like I don't think that they would get detained by sex workers, you know what I mean? Like that kind of K-pop is so popular now that kind of confusion I think would be very rare. But very interesting to show crazy story. And reflective of how much it has grown, become more popular.
So moving on to talk a bit about concepts in the third generation, and I think that one of the strongest examples of a unique third gen thing is groups having lore.
Yeah, totally.
Starting with like EXO and their superpowers, and then I know groups like BTS have like really complicated through lines of their music videos. Even Infinite, which I put it as a cusper group, remember all of their music videos, like L always died in the music videos, and it was like somehow like, I don't know, this idea of like a group being more than like, these are six cute boys and this one likes soccer and this one likes drums.
Totally.
It's like they're actually from another planet. Like adding this level of like mystery and giving a reason to make fans watch music videos a bazillion times and like, I don't know, just making the whole thing more complicated.
Totally. And SM in particular loves their lore bullshit, because then you have like EXO with all of their powers, and you have like Red Velvet with all of their murders, and then you have NCT with all of their bullshit. And it's just like, oh my God, how much more complicated can we get? Like, I'm terrified to see what SM puts out as a fifth generation group. Like, what will happen after NCT? Yeah. What will they birth? Ugh, I don't want to know.
No idea. But yeah, lore is definitely like a very third gen thing.
Yeah.
To make things really complicated. And as discussed earlier, I thought it was interesting that the vast majority of boy groups from this time period debuted with the exact same drop crotch, flat build hat concept. Like all of them. Yep. It's so funny to me that they all just had the exact same idea. Mm-hmm. Like, this is what cool boys are.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think is really not unique. Yeah, actually maybe unique to the third gen, because it's not happening anymore, is extremely sexy girl group concepts. Yeah. Like borderline pornographic girl group concepts was so prevalent in this time period. Mm-hmm. Like Stellar and Nine Muses and Hello Venus and whatever, asses out, like banned music videos. That's why I was curious about that censorship thing you said, is because like this is the time period where everyone was making the naughtiest music videos. Mm-hmm. And they're up on YouTube. I'm sure they never aired on TV.
Totally.
But like, yeah, it's just kind of curious. Because yeah, there were very sexy girl groups. And now there are no sexy girl
Yes,
groups.
It's true. And I almost wonder if there's a correlation of like a lot of like sexy girl groups or like maybe like concepts for music videos were getting sexier, especially when you think about like Sistar as a second gen girl group, because the other second gen girl groups, like if you think of the two other biggest ones, would be like 2NE1 and Girls' Generation, and neither of them, they have very different concepts obviously, but neither of them do like overtly sexy things. And then you have Sistar that is like buns out always, and so maybe like with the increasingly sexy concepts, the review committees were kind of like, we gotta start looking at these music videos, like what's happening over here. And then yeah, I totally agree. Like even just looking at this list right off the top, like there are like EXID was always sexy, AOA was always sexy, like Girls' Day, Nine Muses, like always sexy. And yeah, we really don't get that kind of concept of girl groups anymore. And it's interesting because it's like like they had more, I don't know, of like, this concept is that they are sexy women as opposed to they are cute girls or cool girls or something like that. Like we really don't get, I can't think of a girl group right now that has a concept where it's like, we are sexy women. And not in the sense that like Twice and Red Velvet are like grown sexy women, but I mean in the sense of like, you know, Sistar like doing the leg dance, or like Girls' Day with their slits up to the thighs doing something with their feathers or whatever. Like that kind of shit doesn't really, those are not the girl groups that are being produced nowadays.
Yeah. And I wonder in a like philosophical sense, like why that is. Like, is that some kind of like inadvertent rejection of the male gaze, that it's like, no, we're not going to make these kinds of groups anymore. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of the like girl crush cool young girl groups are still like underdressed or like doing too sexy of moves. It's like they're trying to present a concept that's like tough cool girl, but they're hiding weird sexualization in there, or like that makes me curious.
Totally, like it's still, you know, like, oh, you're wearing like workout gear because you're supposed to just be cool girls and this is for other cool girls, but then you're dropping into the WAP and I'm thinking, who's that for? Because it's not for me.
Yes. Yeah.
But I guess we'll have to dive more into that analysis in 5 years when we get to our fourth gen.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I feel like overall, like the third gen does just truly like feel like an extension of the second gen, and like we said at the beginning, because so many of these groups are lasting so much longer, it feels like the groups themselves then get to go through generation eras and
totally.
like, you know, move with throughout with the times.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to look at like the groups that came out in the beginning of this generation and the groups that came out toward the end, and you see like, you know, at the beginning you have like Infinite and EXO and Block B and Crayon Pop, and like these are groups that didn't necessarily have a lot of like freedom in creating their own image or music. And then toward the end of the group, you have people like 17 and like Pentagon and like Mamamoo. And I think that those groups had much more of a say in who they are and like who they eventually became. And so like you see groups like EXO like eventually get creative control of them. But now even in the like later half of the third gen, you're seeing groups that are starting out with more creative control. And that starts to set a precedent that gets taken into the fourth gen, I think, of like more self-producing groups, or groups that have a handle in some piece of their own music, at least way more so than we ever saw in second gen. Because like most second gen groups, like they had to like earn the privilege to have a say in their shit,
to write one song.
exactly,
Whatever,
exactly, or like choose one outfit or whatever. But yeah. Just some like ending, I guess, fun facts about the generation. Well, like I said before, like the censorship laws changed right at the beginning, so that caused an interesting like ripple effect. But then also in 2012, I saw that Girls' Generation, so like again, this is a record that is being set by a second gen group, but it's happening in the third gen and going to be like opening doors for other third gen groups. But Girls' Generation becomes the first K-pop group to appear on US late night TV and a morning show. They appeared on the late night show, or the whatever, whatever it was with David Letterman, and then they did the morning show live with Kelly. And that's something that happens way more often now. Like I can think of like 4 different groups that have been on morning talk shows.
Oh yeah, God bless Kelly Clarkson, our new K-pop queen, like having every group on her show. I love that. That like the merging of like Kelly Clarkson and K-pop is so good to me.
Yeah, and she's so delightful and like so excited to have everybody on her show that it's like always very pleasant and adorable. It's like that morning talk show with the 2 ladies who like absolutely adore. Remember when Monsta X was on there?
Oh my
and
God,
they like
those New York
fell
ladies
in love
who
with
were
them.
so nice.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're great. They're great. I love them. Like we mentioned, also Gangnam Style came out in 2012, so that was huge, brought a lot of international eyes to K-pop for the first time, and Psy became the first Korean artist to perform at the American Music Awards. And then the year 2014 set a whole bunch of Hallyu Wave records. For one, like that was when the YouTube had to change their That was when YouTube had to change their counter because of Psy. But also I saw that 2014 was the first time that 2 K-pop artists ever appeared on the Billboard 200 at the same time. So every other time an artist has been on the Billboard before this, it was only ever one at a time. But in 2014, 2NE1's Crush and Girls' Generation's Mr. Mister were both on the Billboard 200. And now I think that there's K-pop on these US and digital and world charts so much.
I bet you nowadays there's probably like never less than 15, and that feels like I'm being conservative. Like there's probably at least 15 K-pop songs on the Billboard 200 at all times. Because I know for a fact that like the ARMY keep like 3 different BTS songs like up in the charts at all times.
Constantly.
Always, no yeah. And so yeah, it's funny to think about that too.
Yes, to think about a time where there was only 2. I know, it's crazy. I had to write it down. I was like, holy shit, the world is truly a different place now.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, those are our musings about what we think sets the third generation apart from the generations before and after it, and then we'll revisit this in a couple more years and see how the fourth generation shook out.
Yeah, and I'm very intrigued to get to that fourth gen episode eventually and like dive into these cuspers of like the end and the beginning of the fourth gen, because I just find that the transition phase I think is really fun and interesting.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I was gonna say I just like thought it was so funny that only 4 years ago it was like it's too close. I literally can't speak on it.
Yeah.
It's still happening. And then like now I'm like, no, it's clear from here like that things had already started to change. But I felt so unconfident 4 years ago to be like, we're in a fourth gen already, because it didn't feel as clear as it feels now.
Totally. I mean, even when we thought about doing this like a couple weeks ago or whatever, when we were like planning out our next, month or so of content and decided to do this episode, I was a little bit nervous because I was like, what if I am still too entrenched in my third gen to like take a step back and look at it from, above or whatever, try to get that overall view. But then when I sat down, I was like, oh, actually, no, like, the world is very different now, and like the landscape of K-pop has changed so much that it is really clear and easy to see the delineations, I think.
Yeah. So this was fun to take a look at, and I think it's great and neat that so many of our third gen groups are like still with us.
Yeah,
still
that's fun.
And even a huge amount of second gen groups are still around. I just love that K-pop longevity like gets
grows
better all the
exponentially.
time.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's really weird and almost like sad to think about how, I mean, not that any of them were that great, but just that so many of those first gen groups, like the fact that like Sexcuse was a group for like 3 years.
Yes.
Is so crazy.
Yeah, it is really nuts to think about it now, and then to think of like, oh, their whole career only lasted that long? Like, what? It's so strange.
Yeah. So I'm glad groups stick around longer.
Me too.
And yeah, looking forward to revisiting this down the line. But this was a fun little look at a fun time in K-pop. The time that I joined K-pop. So like this is even though I like mostly second gen groups, I feel like I'm a third gen era stan because that's when I got involved.
Yeah, well, we started listening like right at the beginning of the third gen, but then like you said, like a lot of the groups that were the biggest were from the second gen. So like, but so we got into it and started listening to them when they were already established and had like been on the scene for at least 5 years already. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, hope you enjoyed that little discussion, and we'll be right back with our random game. All right, we are back, and I had the random number generator choose third gen from the third gen range only, and they gave us AOA, debuted in 2012.
Yes, they were originally an 8-member group from FNC Entertainment, and they lasted until 2020, I think is when they're like listed as being disbanded. And by the time the group ended, they only had 3 members. But AOA stood for Ace of Angels, and they were originally debuted as like a dance group and band. But then in 2015, they had like moderate success for the first couple years, and then 2015, their song Heart Attack debuted at the top of several charts. It became one of the most downloaded songs of the year and one of the longest charting singles on Melon's Top 100 chart. So that like really launched and secured their popularity. And then I feel like for me, the thing I think about AOA with the most is, and like they're on the deep dive list, so we'll dive more into we'll get more detailed on them later. But the thing I always think of AOA, I feel like they had a ton of like sub units and like different groups and things like that, because like Orange Care
units,
only
Cream
2
and Black. Yeah, AOA Cream and
I'm
AOA
thinking
Black.
of After School. Because they had a whole bunch of different like groups and combos.
They had
and
3.
shit.
AOA White, AOA white,
Okay,
AOA
they had
cream,
3.
and AOA black. They had
Okay,
3,
that's
and
a lot.
We talked
That's a
about
lot
all of
of
them in our subunit episode. We definitely like took a moment for all of them.
Yes, we did. We did. But yeah, so like I said, we'll get more into them later because they can do absolutely a whole, we can do a whole deep dive episode on them. So just overall, they released 3 studio albums, 1 compilation album, 21 music videos, 6 EPs, 19 singles, and 4 promotional singles. So quite a
Yes.
large discography for AOA.
Yeah, they got a lot of music out while they could. My favorite of their songs will always be Like a Cat. I think that little like kitty cat choreo is so good. Yeah, and AOA was absolutely 100% one of these extremely sexy. Not as far as like Stellar was, and like I think Feistar. There were a couple that were like,
Yes, that were just
whoa.
like, oh, so many
But
many
AOA
butts.
was definitely like a sexy group. And I remember my like introduction to them was watching We Got Married International or Global or whatever it was called, when Heechul was married to that really nice Japanese actress. And she took him to go see AOA, and he was like literally like the wolf in like a cartoon, like buggy, heart eyes, like tongue out, like oh, like acting fucking crazy around AOA. And they did like their sexy dance for him, and he was freaking out.
Wow.
So that was my introduction to them. But
Well, all right. We are going to watch a great example of their sexy grown concept, which is Miniskirt. It is their most watched music video with 91 million views.
so if you'd like to check it out with us, you can pull up AOA Miniskirt and press play when I say go. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, we've
All
got
right, we're starting on a crotch shot.
Yeah, crotch shot of the teeniest, tiniest shorts. A girl in a white button-up getting back into bed.
Very gauzy, dreamy filter on this.
Ooh.
Oh, here they
okay,
are.
so now we have our dance. So we're going back and forth between dance set, box set, and then in a house. Ooh, floor choreo right away.
But yes, the concept of this one was absolutely like stockings and stiletto heels. Like it was kind of like office sexy.
Yes.
Like
business
they
sexy.
look like hot secretaries or something.
Yeah.
Like,
And because their skirts are not super short, they're like sort of high mid thigh, where when they bend over you can see the top of their thigh high stockings, but it's not like right under the butt mini skirt.
zippy choreo.
The dress unzips. This
Yeah,
is such
see
a good song.
the butt focus on
Yeah.
this is very much.
And the sexy
S-lines in the
eating,
AOA choreo is wild.
Yeah, AOA is like a queen of an S line. Oh, sexily taking her shoes off in the car.
Yeah, everything about this is just very like sensuals, and they seem really like they seem rich and they seem cool
And
they like
expensive.
yes, expensive and
very
the
like
shoes
classy.
are great.
Yeah. All these like slick, tight dresses.
Oh,
Okay.
sexy cream eating.
Sexy whipped cream licking. A lot of long legs. Showing off your long legs. A little bit of some crotch choreo. Ooh. Ripping the...
Tear away that skirt.
Yeah, ripping the fabric away. There's also a part of the choreo where they stand in a line and they are holding each other's butts as they wiggle their hips in a circle.
I do like though, because I think it's like one of my favorite things when a K-pop concept or the choreo requires a special outfit, like that both of their little choreo outfits have a zip because they need to unzip the skirt as part of the choreography. I
Totally.
think stuff like that is the funnest. Cheers!
Yes.
Oh, they're all getting naked.
Oh, yeah, the other scenes, they're all taking things off. Oh, somebody's getting into the bath. Ooh la la. Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Tis sensual.
I'm scandalized.
Gossip. Wow.
Oh my god, these ending poses. They're so sexy.
Was it all a dream? She looks like she's having a
dream.
sexy dream. Who takes a nap in jean shorts? That's how you get a
denim
yeast
shorts.
infection. What? And then this cat just comes to wake her up? What the fuck? Wait, what? Like a cat?
Oh, because that was probably the song right before or right after it, so maybe it's a little teasy.
Okay, it's very funny that super sexy music video ends with her snuggling and kissing
cuddling
an
a cat.
objectively ugly orange cat. That's hilarious. I love it.
Well, that was fun,
great.
and I
AOA.
do look very forward. I look very forward to looking into AOA someday because I think that the vast majority of their songs were bangers and they were like super hot, but they had so much like internal turmoil.
Totally.
And their most popular member like left to have a boyfriend, and then like one of them was a bully, and like it's got lots of fun intrigue.
Yes, we're gonna
story.
have so much interesting like gossip and drama to dive into with AOA. I feel like that's one of the reasons I didn't ever try to get into them like when I first started listening to K-pop, because I was like kind of like EXO, where I was like, ooh, a lot of weird shit is happening with this group, like they seem complicated. And I think that's how I felt with AOA too. I was like, y'all are complicated. I don't know about you.
Yeah, very fair, very fair. All right. That means it is weekly recommendation time. Do you have anything to recommend? I just checked the Patreon recommendations and I got nothing from the listeners. And I definitely have not taken in anything new since last week. I was just watching third gen stuff for this episode.
I know, I was just thinking, I was like, maybe there's something from the third gen that I could recommend instead. And I think I'm just going to make a general recommendation that is probably one we've made similarly before. But I think that it's a great idea to just type in your favorite third gen group and Weekly Idol and like see what kind of episodes and clips exist, because it's so fun. The show is still on now, but especially seeing like those early seasons, it's just a really great time always. And if you've never watched a Weekly Idol episode before, it's really fun. A lot of them are available on YouTube or, you know, like some of our other more favorite secretive websites, but you should be able to find it fairly easily, and it's a good time. Like some of our favorite things, like and some things that I think you as like even a newer fan would recognize, like for example the 2 times speed dance, or like a roller coaster dance, or something like that where they change the speeds, or even just doing the like dance, the random dance at any point or whatever, like all of those things started on Weekly Idol, so it's a good time if you've never watched it.
I thought of something I could recommend.
Great.
I like that. I have to stop. Sorry, to stop and acknowledge your recommendation. It is good. I like that. Watch Weekly Idol. It's good for you. And there's like 12 years of archived episodes.
Totally.
You can find it. It was great. But something I did watch this week that I enjoyed is I saw a video. It's a YouTube channel that I follow. It's K-pop adjacent. Not really. The YouTube channel is called Jolly. And it is the friend-based YouTube channel of the Korean Englishman, Josh Carrot, who like makes Korean culture videos. Anyway, he did a video with Woosung, aka Sammy from the Rose.
Okay.
Or current solo artist Woosung. They did a video where Woosung took Josh and his co-host out to like really fancy LA dinner and told them his like life story and like going on K-pop star and being a trainee and living in a windowless room and then like busking with the Rose and like getting turned into a real group and now he's a solo artist. He just like talked a lot about his journey and it was endlessly fascinating. He's very, very charming. So that video is called Woosung Tells His Insane Life Story Over A5 Wagyu, and it's on the Jolly YouTube channel. But I thought it was a nice little interview, and I didn't know much about him at all, and I found him extremely charming in the video.
Nice. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. I love his voice. He has like such a sexy, raspy singing voice, and his solo stuff is very slutty and fun. So I'm glad to hear that he's also charming, because I find his music videos charming as well.
Yeah. Well, that is it for this week. If you would like to get in contact with us, we can be found at AMA Kpop Pod on Twitter and Instagram, amakpoppod@gmail.com for an email. You can call or text us, 181 AMA Kpop 5. P.O. Box 26096, Los Angeles, California, 90026 for regular old mail. Patreon.com/AMAKPopPod for bonus episodes. When Angelica gets home from vacation, I will make her watch the last episode of Queendom. I haven't watched it. I know who won, but I haven't watched it because I'm saving it for you.
Oh, so sweet.
So we can do the final Queendom episode, and then when that is up, I will have the video version of last week's episode where we watched all of your submissions for the one K-pop video.
Yes, and that's just a companion piece to the episode we put out. So it's not the same audio. It is a reaction video of us actually watching all the videos that got sent in. So last week we just discussed them, but the Patreon video will be us sitting down and watching them for the first time for some.
Yeah, so join Patreon if you want to check that out, along with all kinds of other fun video and audio bonus content we have on there. Next week, we will be telling you about our time at the Monsta X concert that has been put off and rescheduled so many times. I'm telling y'all, I bought these tickets in 2019.
That is so
It's finally
bananas
happening.
It's so bananas that you bought these tickets you bought them so long ago that we're down a member.
Or it was February 2020. It was February 2020, but it was so
either
long
way,
ago.
it's
but last
been
time
so long that the lineup is different
so
now.
Yes.
And
last time
Shonu
we saw
won't
Monsta X,
be there.
there were 7 people, and this time we
true.
will only see 5 people.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts.
Which is pretty crazy.
That's pretty crazy.
But I got floor seats for the first time in my life, so look forward to us describing what that's like.
Hell yeah, it's going to be great.
And also in future concert episode news, the K-pop gods shined upon me, and we will be seeing 17 for the 4th time this summer. I'm so excited.
I can't believe that we have the opportunity to see 17 so many times.
I know, it's
How
such a
blessed
blessing.
are we?
So blessed.
It's because our love is good and pure.
Yep. And the K-pop gods shine upon us. But thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week. And y'all are the best, and love you, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Jonghyun, you're our inspiration.